So our speaker is Christen McLemore. She is the founder and president of Hey Mac Consulting LLC. She's going to be talking about three of our favorite things: leadership, love, and belonging. She is a recovering project manager and agile purist with decades of practical experience coaching, leading agile transformations, and consulting Fortune 100 companies. She took the leap to start her own business. She is dedicated to serving the agile coaching community by promoting leadership, love, and belonging! Exclamation point. With her quick wit and loving irreverence, Christen is known for her raw and humorous discussions with people struggling to be brave and successful in today's sometimes callous, alienating workplaces. Oh man, we're all there. People appreciate her thoughtful, direct, and grounding guidance that almost always ends with a mutual laugh and an F-bomb for good measure. Sounds like our kind of person. She lives in Colorado with her rescued Great Pyrenees, Madeline. You'll likely find the two of them camping, finding new places for inspiration, and visiting with friends year-round. Well, let's give a wonderful launchpad welcome to Christen McLemore. Hey.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I appreciate your introduction, and I'm so happy to see all of you as well. I'm actually on two different screens so I can see your facial expressions, because that's one of the things we miss out on, not being able to be in person. And obviously with me in Colorado and many of you all over the rest of the US, mostly in Texas, we can't actually get together. So yes, I started my own business a couple of years ago, actually after being accidentally laid off through a clerical error at a large company as part of a, basically they bought our company, and people use spreadsheets all the time. I got added along with 5 of my other colleagues to the wrong list. And we got emails that we were terminated at 6 a.m. in November 2018, actually. And it was kind of the kick in the butt for me to start my own business. Now, since then, in January of 2021, this year, I actually took a full-time position with Red Hat. And I've been working there since. But I still do consulting on the weekends, do a lot of other kind of coaching and one-on-one consulting and things like that. So I will talk to you all today about my three favorite topics that really grew on me because, as many of you, I've had really great bosses and I've had some really crappy ones. And they have quotes that you've probably read before. People don't leave jobs, they leave bosses. Because if the people you work for are not supportive and there's not a good connection there, you're often going to go. And if you go, a lot of other people start to leave with you. So one of the first things I wanted to ask you is to think about the boss that you may have had in the last, I don't know, your career really. And if you think about the word leadership, boss or manager is not always equal to leadership. It's unfortunate, but it does happen. So what about those bosses, though, that you've had in the past that you just loved? You would follow them wherever they went. If they took you with, that would be awesome. Just think of that person in your mind. Now, what defines a leader you would follow? And please feel free to unmute and have a discussion or even use the chat. I just can't see the chat while I'm presenting. So maybe Kathy can help me if we do get some comments. What kind of things have they said, maybe? What are they saying to you that makes them great leaders, great bosses? What do they look like? They look like
this one
you.
says visionary, knew how to congeal the talents of his people.
Yeah.
Encouraging, loyal, inspiring, available always.
Yeah. Now
Respect.
we may all, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Respect, empathy, cheerleader that helps you grow. Supportive, protective of you as an employee, encourages training, trusts me, an advocate for her people, fair.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing, if you're listening to these are all words that are descriptors of a person who is thinking about you, not themselves. Right? It's all things that they're doing to support you, to support the rest of the group, to bring all the ideas together. So it's this outward focus. And in the Agile community, we talk about a phrase called servant leadership. And the reason we use that phrase is because it's another way of saying something similar, which is lead by example. If you want to exude a certain type of action or behavior or create a culture, you have to do it first, because people watch what you do. If you don't do the things that you keep saying, it doesn't matter. It negates what you say. So it has to be in congruence. So I went online and found a bunch of definitions of what leadership was. And as you can see, this definition has actually come from, I think it's the Webster's Dictionary. So the action of leading a group of people or an organization. So some of the synonyms, though, and these were some things that some folks didn't agree with: guidance, direction, authority, control, management, and supervision. So some of those words, I think a lot of us would say are more negative now. In maybe 30 years, 30, 40 years ago, it might not have been an issue, but we often think of leaders that are sometimes not in our own demographic. I'm almost 50, 20 years ago when I would look at management and leadership, they were 50s, 60s sometimes. So I felt like there was a disparity of who I was and who they were. And so my impression of what leadership was something I didn't want. So if you might have a belief about what leadership is or management, maybe this might give you an idea of sort of sorry, I'm trying to get this little, I hope you can't see this banner for Zoom on the screen, but hopefully it's not covering this up. But sometimes the way people look can change your opinion about whether or not they're a good leader or a manager. Because, do I have to dress like this to be a golfer, to be a pro golfer? I don't know if you remember the movie Happy Gilmore. Not the greatest movie, but the point was that he was very different. He was a hockey player, not a golfer. And he came out on the golf course to play professional golf. And yet he had a hockey stick and was wearing a hockey jersey. He didn't look like the rest of the folks that were playing on the pro tour. So we have to consider that managers, leaders, however you categorize people, today, and probably for the next 5 to 10 years, we have the largest, most diverse group of individuals in the workforce. We've got people who maybe 20 years ago, they would have retired by now, and they're staying in the workforce. We also have a lot of folks who are struggling to find jobs in their 20s coming out of college. So if you look at that diverse group, they all have a different background of what management or leadership was supposed to be, and how to be a leader and how to manage people. So just a super quick overview of timing, because there are folks who were brought up in some of these, not in the 1840s, but just knowing how the historical evolution of leadership and management. If you look at 1840s through 1940s, we've got a shift that went from this new management era where we have to find somebody to blame when something goes wrong. Then you move into 1880s. Now we see the military training start to influence commercial management structures. We have a Prussian army chief and general staff who wrote about mission tactics, where he talked about delegation. So instead of you doing all the work, you delegate the work to other people. In the 1910s, we started to see there's only one best way to do things, which if you talk to someone today about best practice, 9 times out of 10, you're going to have somebody said, well, the best practice is not necessarily best for us or for me. So maybe we should use a common practice just to inform people about it's a common way of doing things, but it's not the only way of doing things. So that's another contrast to management styles. Then 1920s, we have warships who were putting supervisors in charge of shipbuilders. So now you have people overseeing that work. 1930s, again, military influence. We have a German Army field manual where they said an officer is in every sense a teacher and a leader. And the battlefield requires soldiers who can think and act independently. So now they're starting to think, oh, I don't need to tell everybody what to do all the time, because we can't do that. We have to do it differently. The situation requires that we allow people to think on their feet, but we have to give them all the baseline information in order for those decisions to be made appropriately, because now they're more educated about all the options that are possibly to save their life and other people's lives. Then we move into 1940s, and this is where training became like this rapid training for fast productions because supervisors needed to be able to train more people. And if you think about the time frame, this is when a lot of men were going off to war, women were staying, and we were also adding women to the workforce, building ships, working on planes and things like that. So now this is a completely different group of people who've never done this before, and now we have to very quickly get them up to speed on how to do things. In the 1944-45 time period, that's towards the end of the war. This is where IBM and Deming's work started to get recognized, but the US and Ford Production Systems decided we are not interested in what you have to say about how to improve how we build cars. And so Deming left and went to Japan and helped Toyota. And this was around the time frame where Toyota had this Toyota production system that was put in place with Deming's influence, along with someone named Taiichi Ohno, and they built which is debatable, but they built the process in which cars were built to be so efficient that they started to oversell the US-based Ford vehicles. So that's when they brought Deming back and said, hey, come back to the US because we're failing, and Toyota is sort of taking over in that market. So we're starting to see the shifts there. Then we move into 1950s. Now think about this. People who were, let's see, they're in their 70s now, right? If they were born in the 50s, but if they were taught by parents, fathers, other folks in this time frame, this was when we started writing down documentation. We had manuals for everything. Deming was also helping Toyota build a 10-week program for supervisors. So this is when we started to see more systems thinking, as well as any acknowledgement of someone's natural ability and put them in roles where they naturally fit. So you're not having to force people to learn certain things. We now are looking at aptitudes. 1960s, Toyota Production System got this thing called just-in-time flow. And you may or may not have heard of this process called Kanban. It's spelled Kanban. And it's something that we use even in software engineering now for different ways to very quickly get through development of software to produce it more incrementally and iteratively rather than wait and not do anything for years at a time, because the way the industry works is just too slow to do that. 1970s is where psychology started to influence how management styles, management training started to become more about, we have this theory of X and Y. We have some people, the X people, they don't like to work, and they don't do their best without someone telling them what to do, threatening them, or giving them some sort of an incentive. That was the X theory. The Y theory, the Z theory was people are motivated to actually do a job well, and when their talents are valued and they're cooperating with other people, they actually flourish. So it was these two contrasting opinions about how people operate. In the 80s, this was when we saw Japan decide Deming was rediscovered. He now becomes more influential. Ford started to implement the work that he had done with Toyota. And so you start to see similar practices between the two countries and the two different industries. And then finally in the 1990s, this is where a lot of process documentation started to flourish. So we were seeing things like waterfall software development, Six Sigma, for different ways to certify how you get things done with change management. They started using terms like resource utilization. And people, nowadays are like, I'm not a resource. I'm a human being with a heartbeat, and I need to be cared for. So please don't call me a resource. A resource is hardware or tools in your toolbox, but that's not who I am. And then we also started to hear phrases like repeatable process, something that you could build one and continue to do it the same way, and that you don't have to keep rethinking that. Now, because of all that change, think about the people that you have worked with, and it might even be you, that you were brought up in certain time frames where that was what you were told management was supposed to be. And that's how you treated other people. Evidenced by just thinking back about all of the people that have managed you, or you have been a manager, and you think about my style or their style of what did they do for me? Did they actually nurture the natural capabilities that I had? Did they work with me on the way that I communicate? Did they work with other people on my team so that they could build a team that was really great? Did they think about more than just the bottom line? Or did they have some other way of managing? So I'm going to show you a video, and hopefully with the audio, it will come through quickly.
It was the first time man walked on the moon.
Listen, babe, everything's going just swimmingly. Beautiful.
Because he stayed in orbit. Because they guided them safely.
Columbia, this is Houston. Do you copy?
Because she made the right calculations.
Roger, Columbia. This is Charlie. How do you read?
And because he let them focus on the mission instead of the mess.
So everyone matters, no matter whether you are the CEO of the company, the engineer who is developing something, a project manager who's managing work, someone who works on the building with facilities and maintenance, or even a janitor. All of them are valuable to make the company successful. And Richard Branson actually mentioned that in several quotes over the last decade, where he said, if you don't value people for who they are, they won't value the company that they work at. And I'm paraphrasing, of course, because I'm terrible at memorizing quotes, but that particular commercial was actually broadcast, I think, in Super Bowl last year, January. And it really struck me because, one, this was around the time that Hidden Figures, the Disney movie, had come out about the women who had actually done a lot of the calculations to help NASA with their launch calculations and actually helped them when they had a problem. And it was important to recognize when you walk around the halls of the office, which someday I hope we get to do again, are we acknowledging that everyone we pass is a valuable human being that's doing a part of this company's goals and objectives, as well as bringing the human side of why we go to the workplace in the first place? Because there's an element of connection that we need, both physical, energy, verbal, like all of those things are so important. And if we dismiss that, then we're forgetting there's another element of being human and developing whatever we're doing in our company. And Richard actually, and I actually have the correct quote here, said, if you train people well enough so they can leave, you also treat them well enough so they don't want to. And I get chills every time I read that, because that is such a critical thing for us to remember, is that even if I'm not a people manager, am I feeling this way whenever I show up for work? Not every single day, because we all have our ups and downs, but for 75% or 90% of the time, I feel like I'm treated well. And even though I have the option to leave, I don't want to, because I love working here. So how many of you have actually had a job where you just loved the people so much that even though the job wasn't perfect, you stayed because you just loved working with the folks that you worked with? Yeah, that's like magic. Those are those jobs that you wish would last forever. And sometimes they do, and then sometimes they don't. And then you try to recreate it when you go to the next place, or you try to find a place that has it again, so that you can get those warm fuzzies, or at least those confident, spaces where you feel productive and that you feel valued and appreciated, and all those things. So when I go and look for a job, those are the kinds of questions that I ask during the interview. Because remember, an interview is not just about them figuring out whether you are the right person, but it's also for you to figure out if they are the right company that's going to serve your needs. And that was a huge pivot for me in the last probably 10 years, is that I was always trying to remember that during the interview process. And amazingly, something happened. I relaxed during the interview. And even though I really did well in the interview, at the end of it, I also realized that's not the right place for me, and that's okay. And so you're bringing your best, self, as Brene and all those other folks. So you said that phrase, even Oprah, I think, said at one point. But when you bring your best self to that, you know what you're looking for, and you know what you need, then it's much, much easier for you to evaluate every opportunity that comes to you. Granted, there are going to be times where you're like, I just need to take the job at Wendy's. I'm going to have to do it because I got to make some money. Yes, there's always a means to end for certain situations. But when you are looking for that job, that one that you really want to do, that is where it starts to click, is when you know what you want, and you're also looking for where a place like this, where they're going to treat me well, that are going to recognize me as a human being that needs to be listened to, and that I can contribute and feel appreciated, then I'm going to find the right place, whether it is at Wendy's or if it's at Tesla or SpaceX or wherever you want to be. Actually just had a friend recently say, I've been living in Florida in Melbourne, right outside of the NASA launch pad. And I've been watching those launches for years. And I've always wanted to work there. And I don't know what I would do, but I just want to work for NASA. And I said, well, what's stopping you? Well, I don't have the education for it. I'm not an aeronautics engineer and I'm not this or that. And I said, would you take a janitor job at NASA? He's like, hell yeah, because I'd have a badge. I'd be able to get in the building. I'd be able to do all this stuff. And I said, so it's not necessarily about launching the rockets. It's just that energy about being with that group. So take it. Like if you could, just why not? Now he didn't take the job. He's not a janitor at NASA. But what he did is he actually took a job that's main building is in the same 10-mile radius as the launch area. And part of the culture of the company is when they have launch dates, they all go outside and sit in the bleachers and they watch the rockets lift off and they watch the shuttles launch. And he's like, it's awesome because I'm still connected to it, but I'm not necessarily working at NASA. And it was enough because I realized that it wasn't exactly working at NASA. It was like being around that and being part of that. So that's another part of figuring out like, where do I belong? Where do I want to be? Because it may not always be the one thing that you keep telling yourself. It could be a variation of that too. So it is important to think about all of those elements before you're going out there looking for jobs. Now, the love part, and I'm not talking about Barry White love, although it could be, depending on where you want to see yourself in the workplace. But love has a couple of different definitions. So we've got that intense feeling of deep affection. We have fondness, tenderness, attachment, endearment, right? That's the love that just makes us feel good, like we belong. Then there's the other definition, which is that great interest or pleasure in something. So I'm liking something, I have an inclination for it, I have a disposition, I have partiality to doing certain things. Now, when we use the word love, though, we use it in so many different contexts, right? So if you were to say, I love, what would you fill it in with? What's the blank? What comes to mind?
The movie Anchorman, I love lamp.
Okay.
I love this presentation.
Okay. Has anybody ever said, I love my car?
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah. I love my phone. Like when I finally got the right phone, I love this. If I lose this phone, I don't know where I'm supposed to be tomorrow, right? There's so many things so we use the word love in so many different contexts. And I think it's important because sometimes people feel a little uncomfortable using that word love in the workplace because they feel like, oh, somebody's going to misunderstand me. So I really like to be able to say that word or to show it in different ways. You don't have to say the words, I love you. You don't have to say the word love to have someone know that you love them or that you love something, because sometimes it's actions that express it. So for example, put your seatbelt on, right? Did you get some rest? Did you eat? Those are all ways to express that you love someone, but it's in a different variation of what love is. Like I love my coworkers. I'm not going to date them. Well, I might have in the past, but that was one of those things you don't do anymore. But you do have this concern, this care, this appreciation for people that you share. You have different versions of love. So let's watch this. This is one of my favorite videos. Oh no. Oh, they took it down. I just checked it yesterday and they must have taken it down. Oh, that's sad. So there are different variations of love. I'll just talk through it. There's familiar love. That's the one that is your family, your husband, your wife, your spouse, your kids, your aunts, your uncles, all of the folks that are around you, the people that you love and you care for. Then there's the romantic love. And that's the one that you're committed to, that more sometimes sexual. Some people use that as enough, but it's not always, because it can be the others. And then there's the more platonic sort of love, which is just things that you like to do. You use the word love. You could always use the word like or enjoy. And it's just to say that those things are important, that you enjoy doing them. Now, this company, Kanunu, is similar, like Glassdoor, where they evaluate companies, but this one is internal. So what they did is they were trying to figure out how many times did people respond to employee surveys and use the word love. So they took 250,000 anonymous reviews from real employees that were validated. They actually worked there. And they said, how many times did they use the word love? Well, they had almost 7,000 people use the word love. And these industries, look at these industries, like from top to bottom, 1 to 10. That's crazy. Now, some of them that you would expect, you would hope that they would use the word love because healthcare, health and social matters. So if they didn't use the word love there, you would kind of be a little nervous about why are they working in that field. So it's really nice to see that they were the #1 industry that used the word love the most. But then look at education and service and food and retail. So top 10, all of these industries are using the word love as they're describing their workplace, which is great. Now the question is, are you one of those 7,000 people who've ever had the opportunity that you would have used the word love to review your company? I hope for everyone that you've had it at least once and that you'll have it again. Because I worked at a company called America Online, also known as AOL, for about 20 years. And part of our role there was mostly I was doing software project management. I did some technical work, program management, product development a little bit. And we always had special kind of fun events that we would do. Now, granted, when I started there in 1999, we were a pretty big company. It was growing. I think we went from like 10 million members to 30 million members in about 5 more years. So by 2006 or so, we reached 30 million members on AOL. Yes, and probably a lot of dial-up at the time. And we were very young. All of us were either coming out of college or it might have been our second job. So we kind of grew up together. A lot of us stayed at the company for a long time. So we saw each other date and break up with people and get married and have children. And some of us divorced and then got remarried and then some didn't. And so we saw each other go through all these life phases over these 20 years. And so we were really well bonded. We have over 20 different LinkedIn AOL specific groups that still communicate regularly. And we have 4 that I'm a part of on Facebook. So we almost treated it like we were a family that never got rid of anyone, that even though we moved on to different jobs and went to other companies, we still stayed together because there was something about that culture that was magic. And it stuck with us. So many of us who left there went to other companies hoping and maybe seeking another environment that was very similar to what we had in the past, because we knew it was the way we did our best work. If we got along with people, if we appreciated each other, if we built an organization and a culture that supported continuing to have fun and not just saying it on the wall. It's not just something that you walk by in the front lobby or that it's on the front page of the website, but it's true that we actually laughed together almost every day and that we didn't take each other so seriously, but we got stuff done. Like we still did the job. We still made fantastic products and we were proud of what we did and we were creating more members, by the millions every year. And then I left. And I should note, I actually got laid off 3 times at AOL and then rehired. So I went back because even though they laid me off, I believed that this was the right place for me. It was just such a perfect environment. So I loved working there. I loved the company and I wanted to go back. Now, fast forward in 2013, I had actually hired a company called Rally Software that was based out of Boulder, Colorado. And they came out to help me learn Agile software development, Agile frameworks, and so forth. And then a few years later, I found myself wanting to work for that company. And I moved to Colorado before I even got the job because I knew I was going to work there. I had to work there. Whether or not I was going to be a consultant or a full-time person, I just knew this is the right place. I love the culture. The people are great. I love their mentality. I love their approach to how they help their clients and their customers. And that's where I wanted to be. This was one of our coaches conferences that we held every year. It was a full week. Everybody was taking off client work. We all flew into the Boulder office and we sat together for a week just talking about all the great things we've done and all the great things we wanted to do next for new offerings for our clients. And we are actually playing rock, paper, scissors here. Because if you've ever done rock, paper, scissors just with a certain individual, it's kind of boring. But if you do speed round in a group, they call it Rochambeau, which I had never known. That was another way of another name for rock, paper, scissors. But you get everybody in the group to stand up. You pick a partner. You do rock, paper, scissors. Whoever the winner is goes to find someone else who was a winner. And all the losers have to go to that winner. And they are their biggest fan. They have to cheer for them and say they're going to win. And you end up with only 2 people who end up being the winners from all the games, and then they play, and all of the folks who didn't win are surrounding them, cheering them on. We were at the last 2 people in our coaches group, and as you can see, everybody's clapping, cheering, and doing that. And I actually have done this this technique at the end of a conference in Las Vegas a few years ago, and we had 300 people do this game. It only took 5 minutes to get through 300 people playing the game. And by the end of it, we were so loud and we were having so much fun that the Vegas conference folks who were walking the floor came running into the room thinking that something terrible was happening. And really, we were just having so much fun and making so much noise that they were like, oh my God, we thought something was happening in here, but we're glad to see everybody smiling and have a great time. But part of this team building is also important because as Brene points out, trust is built in the very small moments, not just the big ones. So have you ever had a moment where you had conflict with someone at work and it actually got resolved? You talked through it, and by the end of it, you came out better than you were before. Does anybody had that situation? It was hard, right? It was stressful, probably pissed you off or made you really upset. But by the end of it, it was like, we needed to have that together in order to get to where we are now. I had a friend of mine who's actually a dear friend. At one point, she was going to move to Colorado and asked me if I'd move in with their family because we were so close at that point. But, if I look back 10 years before that, she hated me. We did not get along. We had conflict pretty much every single day. And I remember very vividly, she came into a conference room before a meeting was starting that I was going to facilitate. And as she came around the table, she's pointing her finger at me, yelling about how I don't understand this and I need to do whatever. And I remember thinking, I don't really know why we're having this argument. I don't understand why she's so upset, but she is. And I need to respect that because this is another human that's having a hard time. And I could have done something. I don't know what it is, but I needed to let her know. And she knows I've told this story before. I said, Linda, I can see you're really upset, but I can't hear what you need to tell me past the finger in my face. And she immediately sat down and started to cry. So something else was going on. It didn't have anything to do with me. But because I cared enough about another human being to just let her know that I want to have this conversation, but what is not helping me is that you drop that and then we can talk. And I'll tell you what, within 3 days, we were having dinner together after work. We were talking on the phone and texting each other, on the weekends. And we found out the source of our issue was actually our respective bosses who were pitting us against each other. They were sending us information that was causing conflict for us, but it was really their conflict, not ours. Once we realized that, then we turned the tables and we were saying, okay, we now have a working relationship. We understand where we're coming from and we don't have any issues with each other. We need to work with our bosses to help figure out what's going on there. And guess what? It took us a year because it was not easy. But the 2 bosses that we had, they are now great friends too, because we were able to work through that. So when we say love, it's not always, this great, thing that we think about in the movies and all the romance novels or all this other stuff. Sometimes it's actually respect and it's caring for another individual to know what they may need in that moment that is bigger than what you need in the moment. So just being able to have some empathy for what's going on and really, truly trying to understand what is happening for that other person. Now, I may sound like I'm all, airy fairy and, all these unicorns and rainbows. I'm not. I'm very realistic about a lot of things. And I love George Carlin. So hopefully this is not offensive to anybody, but there's a lot of stuff he says that is not safe for work, but I love him. I think he's been probably one of the greatest comedians that we've had, along with Steve Martin and a couple of other folks. And I love his crassness, because he does kind of hit to the point. Most people work just hard enough to not to get fired and get paid just enough money not to quit. I've been there. I've taken jobs, or I've been in jobs where I was that person. I'm like, just keep paying me, because I'm just going to come in here and work my 8 to 5 and I'm out as 5 o'clock on the dot. I'm done. But it wasn't until I started to reevaluate, what do I really want? What do I need? And where do I get that? And then also ask for it. Because in one situation where I was here, I realized that I wasn't asking for what I needed. And who's to say my boss couldn't provide that for me? So we did. We started talking about, I really don't want to do this, but I'd really love to do that. And they said, okay, well, let's build an action plan together. I can actually connect you with these other folks in the company to figure out if they can use that. I said, well, I'm going to start teaching these Scrum classes at lunch, because I just learned Scrum. We had a trainer come in from Rally Software, and I love it. I think it'd be awesome. So I'm going to take a couple of things and build that in. Great. Put it on our calendar for the company so everybody knows they can come. So for probably 5 or 6 months, I was teaching my own version of a Scrum class in 30 minutes over lunch hour. I had about 10 people show up pretty much every week for that session. And about 6 months later, we had a new senior VP that got hired from Microsoft to AOL. He heard that I was teaching these classes, and he actually asked me, after he talked to my boss, of course, would I be interested in becoming the Agile evangelist for AOL? And I was like, oh, yes, this is exactly what I want, but I didn't think I'd be able to get it because there was no role in the company for that. So I was doing what I love out of the depths of who I was and what I wanted to do, beyond what I was getting paid to do. And it actually paid off. Somebody noticed, and my boss was already aware of what I wanted. So they were keeping an eye out for it too. So that when he came to her and said, hey, I noticed Kristen's doing all this stuff. Do you think she'd want to do this for me? And she said, oh, yes, absolutely. Let's build a transition plan after you talk to her, because I know she's going to say yes. So there's part of this thing is you have to ask, you have to know what you want, have to ask for it, and then keep asking for it. And if whoever you're working with can't give it to you, then maybe do something on the side for free and see if it gets noticed. I've actually coached a couple of clients on doing that as they were coming out of college, because they didn't have a job, in the market right now to try to get work done is pretty tough. So then I moved into management. Now, the first time I moved into management was actually after this guy asked me if I wanted to be the Agile evangelist, and I was horrible. I was a terrible manager. I had no training. I didn't know what I was doing. I just thought, oh, I'll just tell people what to do, and then I'll do what I need to do, and things will be great. Well, it didn't work. So I left that job and took the job at Rally Software. We were all kind of independent contractors for different companies. And we started learning from each other about what we needed as individual contributors from our bosses. And that really helped me understand what was going on. I also took an extreme leadership facilitation class from Steve Farber, who wrote the books Radical Leap and Love is Just Damn Good Business. And he taught about how management has been sort of messed up, where we keep talking about this more dictatorship or director type of role, when really we need a portion of our time spent on the care and feeding of individuals who report to us. We need to know what they want, what they need. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's what my last job, what my boss was doing. She was looking out for me. When I asked her what I needed, she helped me with that. Why didn't I think that's what I needed to do for my own team? So I reworked who I was and how I would work with other people. And this group of crazy people were actually in Las Vegas with me for our conference at CA Technologies, who bought Rally Software at the time. And we were going through a really tough time, but we were so tight. All of us really enjoyed each other. Obviously, you can tell this super grainy picture, but bar lighting is always terrible. But we realized that, the reason why we love working here is because of each one of us. We care about each other. We call in and check on each other. We lived all over the globe. We had people in Mexico, Europe, US, Canada, and yet because we were on the road all the time, usually between Tuesday and Thursday, we always checked in with each other. Hey, how are you doing? Is there anything I can help you with? I might be swamped, but I'm still going to ask the other folks on the team because I want them to know we're connected. Because that's one thing that we learned way before COVID, because we were all remote and we were never with each other. We were always on client sites. We knew we needed to stay connected. And so we were trying in different ways, whether it was using online tools or texting each other or calling each other or meeting up at a conference and just having some dinner and drinks together. We knew we needed that because the stress of sometimes working with the clients who maybe didn't like what we had to say or were pushing back at what we were trying to do, or the stress of just not seeing our own families or being home for days at a time and then having to unpack and repack and get on another plane and get flights delayed and delayed to a client's, all of that stress, we needed a way to get rid of it, or at least to commiserate together and say, yeah, I'm having a hard time too. And that was one of the first things that I realized as a new second time manager. I had an awesome team. I had people who knew exactly what they needed to do. They were at the top of their game. I don't need to tell them what to do every day. What they need from me is to clear the path. They needed for me to be there when they called. They needed me to work with the client sometimes when they were hitting a roadblock, or they're having problems with the sales folks, or they're having problems with something else. They needed me to step in to just make their job easier. So that's why I checked in with them. What can I do to help you? What are you struggling with? Do you just need to talk? Do you just need to vent? Do you need to problem solve? And it's funny because I remember I was sharing this with one of my clients and she said, oh my gosh, it sounds like marriage counseling. Because that's exactly what my therapist said to me and my husband. And I said, well, we're all human. Just because you're married doesn't mean you have different needs, right? You have the same needs, whether you're going to work or you're at home with your family, or you're with your spouse, or with your best friends. Your needs are likely the same. And do we know what they are? And are we communicating those so that we can understand it? One of my favorite books is The 5 Love Languages. And I remember reading up on that, or there's 4, I always get my numbers wrong, but that was something that was really cool for me to learn, because I had a really good friend who always gave me trinkets. And I'm like, I don't want stuff, because my dad was military, moved around every 2 or 3 years. And I don't like to accumulate things because I had to pack it and then unpack it. It was just a pain. But I recognize that it's not the gift, it's the act of giving. That is her expression of love. So if I can see past the little whatever she's giving me and recognize it's that offering, that I cared enough that I thought about you when I saw this, and I'm giving you this as a recognition of the moment where I thought of you and I'm still thinking about you. And I was like, oh my gosh, now I feel like an adult, because I can see that now, whereas in the past it was like, oh, something else I have to give away to Goodwill, right? It's something else. You have to see past the action sometimes to know what's going on. So Simon Sinek, hopefully most of you have heard of him. He's written several books. He's been online doing tons of talks, super popular on the conference scene, maybe not so much, with a lot of online stuff going on, but he always talks about working hard for something we don't care about. That's stress. But when we're working hard for something we love, it's passion, it's drive and commitment. It's like you don't even think about the clock. Have you ever worked on something and you totally lost track of time? Those are those moments where you're in the zone. Those are the things you start paying attention to. Where do I lose myself because I'm so enjoying what I'm doing and that I'm so devoted? Those are the things we can start picking up on to recognize where we should go next. My favorite quote from Steve Farber is this one, and I have it plastered everywhere in my office. I actually have a card in my wallet that I pull out sometimes when I'm talking to folks about it. I teach the extreme leadership class that goes deep into what this means, but let's take this apart. Do what you love in the service of people who love what you do. Those 3 components, if you can put those together into your work, oh my gosh, again, magic. This is where things really start to connect for folks. And speaking of connection, that leads us into the last one, which is belonging. So belonging is another definition here. It's a sense of fitting in or feeling like you are an important member of a group, a really close family, gives each other, its members, a strong sense of belonging. How do you know when you belong?
When you feel accepted,
Yeah.
acceptance is such a big part of that. Unified, feeling unified with the people
Yeah.
you're working with or you're, in a group with.
Yeah. What does it feel like when you think you belong?
It's so good for your self-esteem. And I feel like it feels like just such a warm, confident feeling inside, like this is where I'm meant to be. These people care about me. They want me to be here, like I matter, just feel so valued and cared about and important to the group.
Kathy, did you read something in the chat that you were about to say, or you were thinking of something?
It says, it feels like home.
Oh, yeah. I've heard other people say content.
Yes.
There's like
And,
this
and
calm.
safety
Yeah.
that you'll be accepted,
Right.
even if you're having a bad day and you're grumpy, you're safe there.
Right. And I've even heard people say, when I feel like I belong, I can say whatever I'm thinking without having to edit in my head before I open my mouth.
Mhm.
And there's a sense of forgiveness. It's like, it's almost a granted thing that people feel that. They're like, I know I can be upset. I know I can, I've even heard it, and I've actually felt this way myself. So it was funny when someone said it. They're like, I'm funnier when I know I belong.
Yeah, there's a
When
freedom
I'm
to
relaxed, I can crack jokes, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like the Steve Martin of my group. This is awesome.
Yeah, there's a freedom with that.
Yeah.
To just be yourself.
Right. Now, this is one of those words that I think in the last 3 years have become more prominent and more needed and desired, and people are craving the sense of belonging. And we have to also recognize, and I had to recognize this, not everyone has felt like they belong. And they may not feel like they belong right now. And it can be a lot of different reasons for that. We have been studying this for many, many years. And I say we like I was involved, but I'm just saying in the community of researchers. Harvard Business Review actually posted this probably 2 or 3 years ago, and it was an old magazine that I had been flipping through. During my years caring for patients, the most common pathology I saw was not heart disease or diabetes. It's loneliness. Now, I want to point out, because I think it's the elephant in the room, maybe a pretty elephant. When you don't have a job and it's COVID, this sucks. Say it out loud. It sucks. We're just talking with the gentleman before about unemployment. That sucks that you have to get unemployment. I'm sure that a lot of you have been employed, steadily employed for a long time, and this is a new situation to be in. It is not comfortable. In addition to that, being sequestered in the house, not necessarily having family that you might be able to go and socialize with as frequently as you might have in the past, it's hard. So one of the things that I love about this group, and thank you, Shannon and Kathy, for inviting me to speak here, is to recognize that we need each other. And this group is one way to connect, to help battle some of this loneliness that we're feeling, but also to recognize that some of us have been feeling it for a very long time, not just because of COVID and not just because of unemployment. There are a lot of us walking around with smiles on our faces, and that's not how we feel. So the sense of belonging is even more important, that we recognize in ourselves if we're craving it because we don't feel it right now. Where can we go? Who can we reach out to? That's hard to do that, especially when you're in the pits of it, because you don't want to tell people. I just moved here in April to this mountain house, and I've got enough property that I don't really see my neighbors through the trees. But I met my neighbor, 75 years old. He came over and talked to me and welcomed me to the neighborhood, brought me a bottle of wine, and we were talking. And I just met him. And within 30 minutes, he told me he was lonely. So I've been over there 3 times to just sit with him, and he showed off his new house, his house, and all the new things he's done in the house. And I plan to keep going over there because, you know, we have a huge age difference, but who cares? We're humans. We need people. We need connection. I found out he's going to have knee surgery. So I offered to, like, hey, let me know when you're going to have it, because I'm literally right in here. I'll walk through the yard and check on you each day. He jokingly said, he goes, honey, I've got friends. I was like, okay, well, when they're gone and you still need another one, you know that I'm right here. But I think it is so important to recognize that our first experience of belonging should be in our own family. But some of us didn't have that, and we have carried that for our whole lives. We don't know what that sense of belonging is like. So I know this is sort of, you know, dipping a little bit in the energy level in this conversation, but I think it's an important thing to point out is that we don't always have the same experience growing up as kids, and it carries into adulthood. So knowing that, you know, you may or may not have strong relationships with your family. This is mine back in the 70s, as you can probably guess. And we develop these sense of confidence and a sense of belonging based on what we experience in the home place. And then things happen, you know, you get older and you go to high school and you become the band geek like I was, where it was at the time like not necessarily the lowest on the totem pole of folks in high school, but it certainly was not, you know, super popular to be in band. And, you know, they've made movies about it one time in band camp. I get that all the time. And yes, I did play the flute as evidenced by the picture, but I was good. I actually got a music scholarship to go to college for it. So I'm not afraid to tell people now because it's funny. And it reminisces because I also meet a lot of other people who are also band geeks. And we joke about how, guess what? We're now making really good money and all these jobs, and everybody kind of poo-pooed the idea that we were in band together. And it's not that big of a deal. It was part of learning how to get along and to find connections with people that may have the same affinity. We were all musically inclined, and I went to college, and we start gravitating towards people who have the same interests and the same beliefs and values, and maybe even the same sense of humor, which is why we talk about the workplace next. And hopefully this video has not been taken down, but Fictive Kinship by Amy Hunter is awesome.
All right, so we're gonna play a little game here. Fictive kinship means that people who are not biologically related to you, you treat as if they are kin. How many people in here have a woman or a man that you feel is like your brother or sister? Right, and maybe even your kids call them aunt or uncle. Yeah? Yeah, okay, that's fictive kinship. What's really cool about fictive kinship is that it allows us to be connected and feel connected even though we're not biologically related. The other really cool part about fictive kinship is that it also shares 2 elements, pride and shame. So when something really wonderful happens in our life, we have a moment of being proud, not just for ourselves, but for the other person. When something sad or tragic happens, we have a shared shame. Does that make sense? All right. We can solve what is going on here in St. Louis, but also globally, if we use fictive kinship as a way to get close to each other.
Does that resonate with anyone? Yeah. We used to joke at AOL, we spent a lot of time, sometimes 12 hours a day in the office because of projects that were going on. And we would joke about how we had become very close and really good friends, and we were spending more time with each other than we were with our spouses or family at home. So we would joke about, this is my work husband or my work wife, and you know, it was a joke. But there's some truth to that, because we start to get to know each other well enough, and we build relationships with people that we work with where it makes it easy. We start to finish each other's sentences. We start to recognize when someone's upset without them saying a word. We also want to know about their lives outside of work. Like, hey, how are the kids? And, oh, hey, how did the baseball game go last night? Or, hey, I saw you were out last week. Are you feeling better? Is anybody else on the family sick? Or hey, well, how was that vacation? Show me all the pictures, and whether or not it was a fur kid or a real kid or a human child, you're out, showing pictures and posting them up. And my group right now at Red Hat, we actually spend the first 2 to 4 minutes of every meeting talking about something random. Like one guy, he is super into shoes. And he will always show the latest shoe that he has purchased, which he doesn't even wear. It's like a collection for him. Some of the Nikes and the swooshes and some of the other stuff that are almost art instead of a shoe. Other groups do something similar to that. So one of the ways in which we have evidence of fictive kinship is if we can laugh at the same things. So I'm going to test you to see if maybe we have some fictive kinship together. Now, how about this one? I think a lot of folks have seen this one before. There we go. I see some smiles. All right. So
That's good.
Yeah. So this is letting your guard down, being openly human with other people, to recognize that, the phrase that we all used to joke around about, just remember, even the CEO has to put one leg in each hole of his pants every day. It was to kind of humanize people that, hey, stop thinking about the CEO or the CTO or even the senior VP as someone who's up there that we can't talk to, because they're just as human as we are. They're just as flawed. And they might actually have the same humor as we do as well. A lot of small companies actually resonate around that because they create these fun workplaces and humor and culture that hopefully they start attracting more people who are similar to that. Maybe not exactly the same in personality, but they have the same interests. Another one of my favorite quotes is about authenticity. And I know that's become a little bit of a bullshit bingo word, but if we really talk about the true definition of authenticity, it's really that daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. And this is one of the things that made a huge difference for me as a manager, as well as a human being, is just telling people who I was and joking about the things that I thought were funny. Now, obviously, we have to remember the boundaries of what is appropriate for the workplace. I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying that you don't have to go into every meeting with the agenda and the purpose and dive right into it the second the meeting starts, or complain about people not arriving on time, but have a little bit of socialization at the beginning, especially now because we are doing everything remotely on video. And a lot of people are not able to go into the office just yet. It's important to tap into that so that we are surrounding ourselves with people where we feel we belong. And it is one of the reasons why a few years ago, I actually started a community of belonging on LinkedIn for the Denver area. And all it was a potluck. And we haven't had it for a while because of COVID, but we started this out as every month, people would bring a dish, someone would host, and we would just socialize. And initially, it was a lot of folks who were in my community for the Agile software development side, but we also encouraged people, if you're going to host, bring your neighbors, tell your neighbors about it, because we're trying to expand the reach of people socializing with each other. And it was actually spawned by a speaker named Charles Vogel. He wrote a book called The Art of Community. And one of the things he talked about is while he was in Harvard, he and his wife hosted a potluck for the students, because what they were finding is that a lot of these really super smart people got these great scholarships, but we didn't know anybody when they came to the university. And they were suffering from sometimes depression, but mostly loneliness. They didn't know anyone. They didn't know who to talk to. They were just going to class. They were super stressed out. It was very competitive. And by having people just come over and eat, it kind of neutralizes. It allows people to just sit and have a meal together. In every single culture in the world, food is one of the central things that bring people together and give them that sense of belonging. So that was one of the ways we were trying to cultivate that for our Denver community. I actually spoke at a conference in Tacoma, actually it's north of Seattle, Washington. And after the talk, someone came up and said, I would love to do one of these here. How did you do it? So we spent 20 minutes talking about how to get it started, how to get a LinkedIn page created, how to do all this stuff to create it so that they could start having their own, because we really wanted it to be in person. And that was the goal, is that there's a difference whenever you can actually meet in person versus video. Now, I knew that I wanted to keep going with this, even though COVID had hit last year. So we did do a couple of virtual potlucks, but there's something strange about eating on camera. So it didn't quite work as well. So it's been on hold for a while, but it was just another example of how we were trying to build connections with people. And I would leave you with this thought. We talk about leadership, love, and belonging, but really we're talking about how we transform us. And the only way we can transform us is if we start with me. So we have to evaluate what I want. What do I need? I need to ask for it. Who can I talk to that maybe is just a sounding board, or maybe might even know how to help me get that? I've been working with tons of people over the last 2 years with resume writing, which I'm going to tell you right now, I am horrible at resume writing, but when someone writes one, I can kind of give them feedback on what the format or the content if they're looking for a job. And I remember one of the big things that I had said to a couple of folks was, you probably want to have more than one version of your resume, depending on what job you're trying to go after, because you want to highlight the skills based on whatever. And I'm sure you've all heard that before, but they've never heard that. So it's interesting that, maybe that's something that you all have talked about with interview skills and resume writing, but it's something we're going to start offering our Agile Denver community to help them out, because we have had a lot of folks who have lost their jobs as well. And are trying to find new ones, but creating that community of people who can help you not only with what do I need to talk about, what help do I need to get to the next job, or even some folks who are coming out of college who are really struggling with how to get the right education now, because what they went to school for isn't getting them the job. So now they're having to seek out other training or mentoring opportunities to help them with like internships and things like that. So with that, I hope that this gives you some things to think about, but also maybe some things that you have written down that you can start doing either in service of other people or in service of yourself. But thank you very much for having me today.